Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Honor of the Feminine podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Ledford, and today we have Larisa Noonan with us, and I'm excited to get into our conversation together. As you know, we begin each podcast with an oracle card, and today the deck that came forth was the Dragon Oracle Cards by Diana Cooper. And the dragon that's joining us today is the Silver Lunar Dragon. She bathes you in divine feminine light. Come into balance and practice peace, harmony, and cooperation. And she has woven in with her that energy of the full moon and this preparation for a more golden age where the feminine and the masculine are more harmonized, from a time where the masculine has been at the forefront and showing some of its wounded self, much of its wounded self. This is that stepping into a more divine dance and balance together. And so with the Silver Lunar Dragon, I welcome Larisa to the program. Welcome, Larisa.
Hi, thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you and the Lunar Dragon.
So let's begin today with your journey to becoming a ritualist and the way ritual plays in your life.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start this story way back in the cornfields of Southwest Kansas, which is where I grew up. And I grew up part of a very conservative evangelical Christian religious community called the Holden Mennonites. Ah. And you have heard of them?
The Mennonites, yeah.
I'm hearing a slide.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And so to start there and to end up as a ritualist has been quite a journey, because speaking of spirit outside of very rigid terms wasn't even allowed or considered. Growing up, I did have a couple of guides that I worked with. There were a couple of angels who would show up with me when I called them. And angels were kind of the only spirits other than Jesus and God that were even ever talked about. So I didn't even really know that it was possible to call or to interact with anyone else. And so I called for who I knew of, and they answered. And so I have had guides my whole life, in a sense, but I didn't even really know what I was doing at the time. So when I was about 13, I believe, my parents left this community. They excommunicated themselves. And I was thrown from a very small religious community where everyone knew everybody and there was like their own private religious, again, school into public school. And it was still a small public school because we were still in the middle of nowhere in Southwest Kansas. But I entered more of the world, I guess you could say. And so my horizons began to slowly be expanded. And then I jumped way forward up into college, where I did some traveling and eventually moved out to Oregon and started becoming deeply involved in healing work, doing specifically something called orthobionomy. And orthobionomy is body-centered trauma work, trauma resolution work. So it's really about helping people learn to track what's happening in their own bodies in a safe way and how to be with it in a way that leads to resolution. And yeah, so that was really great. And it felt like I was kind of on a path to a healing path. And part of what was drawing me to a healing path was I have a long history of headaches and migraines that had been non-responsive to anything that I had tried from Western medicine. And also I just had kind of ongoing chronic anxiety, even though I didn't really know that that's what was happening at the time. So I was on a healing journey for myself, and also just felt this deep desire to be a healer. I didn't know where that was coming from, but it was just with me from the time that I was a child onward. And so orthobionomy was like the most profound level of healing that I had found up to that point. But even that wasn't really touching my headaches and migraines. And so I kept searching. And eventually I started dating a man who became my husband. Eventually, but when we first started dating, he had a friend who was studying with African elder Melanoma Somé. Mm-hmm. And Melanoma teaches a lot about the ancestors and about ritual. I mean, that is what he teaches about. That's what he's bringing to the world. And so my friend had been talking to my soon-to-be husband about this, and he was very excited about it and talking to me about it. And I was just like, ancestors? What is that? Like, that's really weird. That's scary. That's super uncomfortable. Why are we talking about this? I don't like it. And he's like, well, it seems like it might be kind of a missing piece. Like, the work that you're doing is great, but there's something missing still. And I'm like, yeah, I know there is, but ancestors, that's weird. And I was really uncomfortable with the concept. I was really uncomfortable with it. But I agreed to go and do a water ritual with my boyfriend, I guess. It's so weird to say boyfriend. I'm like, I don't even know how to talk about him. Soon to be husband. It's really awkward. But so we went to the ocean and we did this ritual where we wrote down everything that was kind of from the past that was interfering with our relationship in the moment. And we did an invocation, which was brand new to me as well. And then we ran into the ocean. It was very cold. Yeah. And just did this cleansing. And then we came out and it felt so good. Like I felt like something actually had been purified, had been cleansed. And I was like, maybe there is something to this. Yeah. And I still felt really uncomfortable with the concept of ancestors. Like growing up, ancestor ritual was considered, I remember that was talked about as being akin to devil worship. And if you do that, you're going to go to hell.
Wow.
And I have, it's that strong. And I have people in my family who actually are missionaries, who have been missionaries for 5 to 10 years. There's a couple different sets of people in Africa, trying to convert people to evangelical Christianity. So, that ritual, the water ritual, was really great. Maybe there's something to this ancestor stuff too. And so I decided to just light a candle for my ancestors, just to honor them while I wrote in my journal for the month of November. And it opened up this process that this day I'm still a little bit terrified of and in awe of, in that it opened up about 2 weeks of complete chaos, me just on my knees over and over and over in this state of complete grief and everything that was still buried inside of me, that was all insecurities, all fear, just started to come up and come out. And it was all I could do to maintain any sort of center during this time. The only time that I felt even a little bit calm and centered was when I went to my candle, which I turned into an altar, and just let it all out to my ancestors. And then I would feel better for a little bit. And then I would leave and I would immediately be hit by all this stuff again. And I kind of thought I was going crazy. I kind of thought that this was going to be how I was going to be for the rest of my life. And it was terrifying. But during that time, my boyfriend had a divination with his friend and his friend told him about setting boundaries and using ash as protection. And so I started to incorporate that into my time at the altar, and was started to specifically call in only the well ancestors, and things started to calm down. And eventually I did come through it. And after coming through it, all of a sudden I had access to all this love and support that had not been there before in my life, access to all this resourcing. I could really feel the love and the support of my ancestors with me. I could hear them. It was really amazing once I came through it, getting through it. It was one of those situations where if I would have known what had happened when I first lit, what was going to happen, I probably wouldn't have lit that candle. But having jumped into it without knowing, and then just having to go through it and just try to keep up with it all, it did lead to something really beautiful and powerful. And so I'm really grateful for it. And now I definitely, teach people who work with me in these ways how to set boundaries from the beginning so they don't have to go through this through quite the intensity that I went through. And for me, it was a really good learning experience in the end. So that's a rather long story of how I started out in a very conservative Christian religion and ended up as a ritualist, because once I came through that experience, there was like no going back. It was like, this is real, this is alive, and this is where I need to be.
Yeah. As you and I were talking before we started recording, I have some similar feelings, and a lot of what you said really resonated. That idea of the missing piece, that's how this has felt to me. Like there's been, yes, I've have spirit guides, but there's been this foundational missing piece that, and the ancestors have started, as I've started to work with them in, another thing you spoke about was a safe ritual space, right? As I've started to do that, I've never felt more love, support, or resourcing. And one of the things that's happening for me right now is I think I've had this old story around, as I felt loved, supported, resourced, as I became more spiritually aware, life was going to be easier, like easy. And that's not actually my experience of it. And so I've been letting go and unraveling those expectations. Part of what's going on for me right now is my mom's in the late stages of Alzheimer's. And so as we're making some real tough family decisions, I've never felt more love, supported, resourced by the ancestors, all of it. And it's still so hard. And I actually think that part of the reason it's hard is that I'm feeling more fully the feelings in the moment rather than stuffing them away to sort of deal with later. And so I'm wondering, because I know that part of your work is really traversing, grief and loss and pain. Can you speak to that grief bit a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And I want to start by saying, I'm sorry to hear about your mother, and, kindness for that and all that you're going through with that.
Thank you.
And it's true, just because we have the support of ancestors and of support, it does, and of spirit, however it is that we're connecting and whoever our guides happen to be, that doesn't necessarily mean that life is going to be easy. Like, stuff is still going to happen. People are still going to die. Accidents are still going to happen. And it does make it easier in some sense, because we do have that extra backing, that extra love and support. But yeah, I think there's something real to what you're saying about it. Also allows us to feel the feelings in the moment. And so it's also super hard at the same time. And I do think that that's my sense is that that's a much healthier way to approach these situations, is to really be with the feelings and allow ourselves to be supported in whatever's coming up in the moment. Because then we don't have this backlog that we have to deal with after the fact. And then we're able to be more real with the people who we're interacting with and with the ones that we love. Like, I'm guessing you're able to express your love more to your mother because you're able to feel more now than you might have been able to if you were just stuffing the feelings and just trying to get through everything that has to be got through in a situation like this. I hope I'm not putting words into your mouth there. No,
that feels exactly right. The stuffing away feels like, to me, my experience of it is that it dulls all my emotions. And so yes, by having the capacity to feel them more in moment to moment without having to push away to, if you'll give me, deal with later, that really doesn't serve me. And I can feel that. Yeah. It opens up pathways to feel all of it more fully. The love, the pain, the loss, the joy, all of it. And not just with my mother, but day to day with my 5-year-old,
Yes. Yes. I feel that for sure. I have a 3-year-old, as you know, too. And it's like every day is a study in celebration and in loss. Every day he like learns something new, and he's a different person from moment to moment to moment at this point, because he's growing so fast. And so every moment I'm like celebrating what's new and grieving what's lost, what was just left behind at the same time. It's, yeah, even just that can be a lot to keep up.
So true. So true. One of the other things that you and I were touching on before we hit record was the idea of traumatic births. And I was sharing with you that my daughter's birth was pretty traumatic. For me, it was meant to be a home birth that after many, many hours ended up as a C-section at the hospital. And yeah, there was just a lot that went in, and I know that I'm a different woman now than I was 5 years ago when I birthed her. But there definitely has been some grieving the kind of birth that I wanted, and some, I'm going to use the word trepidation about stepping back into that experience of like having another child.
I hear that as well. The birth with my son was also very traumatic, and yeah, I applaud your courage to even be considering stepping back in and to be doing that. I had a similar experience with my son, starting out as a home birth, and then after many, many hours ending up in the hospital, and then still many hours after that, I think it was like 67 hours total, ending up in a C-section as well. And then like another 4 days in the hospital after that, before they'd released us. And that's a specific kind of, oh, wow, what do I even want to say about that? That was one of those times when I couldn't keep up with the support ancestors with me. That was one of those times when I wasn't able to keep up with all the feelings in the moment, because it was just so overwhelming and I was so exhausted. And then I was also on a bunch of meds eventually, and then the trauma of surgery, and then the birth injuries that my son sustained, and the like latch issues and the feeding issues, and like the months afterwards of not sleeping and monitoring weight gain, and that not happening in the way that it was supposed to or should have, however you want to say that, like not fast enough to feel comfortable with. And I guess I'm framing it in that way, because even if we have a lot of support, and there's times when we don't feel it, there's times when things happen that are so beyond us that, how do I want to say this again? When life is so overwhelming that all we can really do is just keep up and then just trust that we're being held. Like, I didn't really feel supported a lot of the time during that. I didn't really feel my ancestors. And yet I know that they were there. And like looking back, I can see time and time again where they stepped in really beautiful ways, and where there was interventions that happened that were absolutely crucial, and without which, my words, things could have went much, much worse and been even way more difficult. And there were moments of deep connection in there. Like, the first time I looked into my son's eyes, like just feeling all that otherworldly energy and love coming through, and just wanting to just cry and cry and cry and cry, and just so much beauty in all of it as well. And it's now been, over 3 years later, and there's still pieces of it that I haven't fully processed, and that do come up. But when they come up now, there is so much support for it and so much love for it, and also this sense and this understanding that whole experience wasn't fully just mine. Like there's a history of traumatic births in my mother's line. Like that goes back generations and generations, and in a sense, the fact that my son and that I both survived, and that we have the care that we need in this moment, in this lifetime, is healing for the entire line. Because not all the women haven't had that. That's my sense, at least, that hadn't been available. Maybe they survived, but it was survived. It wasn't. And my son and I have had the chance to walk into healing through his birth and through the aftermath of his birth.
Oh, we have such a broader sense of ourselves with the ancestors, and this idea of that what we carry, yes, it's ours, and yes, it's more than ours. And that we don't have to carry it all on our own because they're there. Like there's this both going on. And there are still those moments that are so overwhelming that it's hard to feel all of that.
Yeah.
I wish, at the time when I was, 5 years ago, I hadn't stepped in with my people at that point. And so, there's that part of me that's like, oh, I wish I had, but so I felt, and yet I can see there were times I had a midwife, at a home birth doctor, and then he had a midwife intern at the time. And she came over once we got home, and she said to me, Shannon, some babies just need to be lifted into the world. And those words have stuck with me. I mean, we're friends now, and I've thanked her for those words, because it helped let go of a lot of stuff I could have held on to. I could feel that even in the moment, and like, what a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And yet, that switch into motherhood and healing from, major surgery and not being able to carry this child around and not being able to do the things that you envisioned you would be able to do in those first couple of months was, it took a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I want to jump a little bit in the story, because there's another kind of like level of healing that I want to speak of, if
Please.
That's okay with you.
Yeah.
So about less than a year later, I actually became pregnant again unexpectedly. And my husband and I had been in this question of, are we going to have another one or are we not? And it felt like this huge gift to have the question taken away. And we were, just like a gift from spirit. Like, this is. And we were so excited and happy about this next one who was coming. And then I miscarried at 11 or 12, 13 weeks, something like that. And, complete devastation, like in this story is about being betrayed by spirit and betrayed by my body, and just all this devastation, just utter devastation. And, slowly healing from that, slowly coming through that. I had a miscarriage also before the birth of my son. And the second miscarriage actually progressed very differently than the first one. Like, it went with ease, and I ended up in the emergency room the first time, and just a lot of stuff that was very difficult with the first one. And the second one, as far as miscarriages go, it was great, which probably sounds really weird to say.
But there's times when things are just super difficult, and there's times when things, even when they're hard, have more ease with them. That's it.
Exactly. And so then for the next year, I'm again in this question of, are we going to have another one or are we not? And just going back and forth, and in kind of an agony over it. And also, like, still, like, every time my moon would come, like, grieving the miscarriage, like, it just wasn't letting go. And even with the resourcing in my ancestors, even with, like, all these great skills I had for being able to feel things in my body and let them pass through, and it just kept coming back, like, after month. Finally, I sat down with a colleague in this ancestral healing work and took it to the ancestors. And it's just like, this grief, it's not stopping. Like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, finally, you're bringing this to us. Thank you. They're like, we've been exaggerating it in you so you would bring it to us, because this needs to be healed in us as well. Like there's been so many miscarriages ungrieved in our lines, so many children who have died who've been ungrieved in our line. And thank you, basically, for bringing this to us and giving us now the space. And all my grandmothers held this massive, from all my different lines. I've worked with 8 lines, so there were a lot of grandmothers there. Held this like massive grief ritual for each other, with all the grandfathers circling around them. And it was incredibly beautiful. And once that completed, my grief was also lifted. And that healing did come to fruition, or come to completion. Yeah. So sometimes what you were saying earlier about sometimes it's ours and others, like it can happen like that too, where these patterns repeat in our own lives because there needs to be specific attention to these patterns in our lineages. And they can't fully resolve in our lines until they've been taken there and they've been resolved within the lineages themselves where they originated.
Oh. I mean, that was just gorgeous. And I love this idea that because you've gotten to know your 8 lines and that they start to know each other more deeply and they've been, healed and harmonized, that they can all come together. I mean, like the magnitude of that, I felt chills.
Yeah. Yeah. Much bigger cultural themes, or much bigger themes that aren't just of a line, but of, like, in this case, are of women, can begin to be resolved and reconciled.
Yeah. And you and I were speaking before we started recording about, how potent the ancestor work is. And I was saying that, I didn't really realize how potent is until I started to step in. And still, even within the ancestor work, as we talk about its ability to, start to heal some of those big things, sexism and racism, and, some of these things that really plague us as a culture, as a society. I don't, as I'm working, my first 4 lines, I can feel that that's possible, but not really the magnitude of it. And so what you just shared had some of that magnitude of it. And so I thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yay. I'm glad it landed.
Oh. It totally landed. Oh, so good. Oh. Oh. Is there anything else that's feeling alive for you to share with us today?
One of my grandfather's lines just constantly show up with the message, the reminder of celebrating. Mm. And they are also a line who, like, really can speak to that sense, that knife's edge, that razor's edge of, like, grief and loss, and walking that they usually show it to me like as a knife's edge, like walking the knife edge between the two and feeling them both, but not getting too lost up in either, or too caught up in either, but maybe remembering to celebrate a little bit more, just because that's not so common in our lives, but walking that line between the two. So, yeah, that's what's showing up for me as a final word.
Oh, I love that. That's actually been a theme that's been up for me for the last couple of years, was like, really, being intentional about celebrating.
Yeah.
Because it's real easy. Yeah. It's real easy to complain. It's real easy to like work through all the shadow and, and get sort of, I don't know, addicted is what comes up, a little bit to that with and not celebrating. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just keep being told over and over that it's incredibly important, and that it is a balance. We're talking with the silver lunar dragon, like the balance of masculine and femininity bringing us into that golden age. And celebration is one of those balancing forces, as I'm being shown.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful. My love, are you ready for the random questions?
Sure.
So, I'll say that, and we had this conversation before I started to record a little bit too. My parents really loved Dr. Zhivago as a movie. It was their first date movie. And Larisa and her parents she was named after, Dr. Zhivago. And so one of the random questions that came up was around, what's your favorite movie?
Oh my goodness. I don't really watch movies these days. I think the last time I was in a theater was maybe 4 years ago. Yeah, I don't even know if I can answer this question. You said these were going to be easy.
I did promise an ease of the random questions. Does a favorite song, does a song that's really up for you right now, is that better, or, whatever. You can switch it up on me.
I'm not really like a person who remembers songs either. Like I'll like listen to a song, I'll be like, oh my God, that was so great, but I completely forget it the next second. But a song that I do really like, it was actually a song that was played at my wedding, the song that my husband and I first danced to after we were married. And it's We're All in This Together by Old Crow Medicine Show. And just We're All in This Together feels just really fitting as like a theme for life right now. And to remember that, and to remember it not only from the standpoint of we're all in this together, but that also means we're not alone.
Yeah. And that we're not alone on this plane.
Yeah.
And with other dimensions too. And I love that was your wedding song with your husband, with the idea that he really took you to your ancestors in a lot of ways, right? He was like, here's the path, babe.
Yeah. He had no idea what he was opening the door to.
So good.
So good. It is.
And so the second random question is, do you have an animal guide that's most present with you right now? Or one that's with you all the time? Either way.
Yeah, I have a lot of animal guides. That's like, there's actually a whole like other initiation story that involves animals being called to go out and do it, or through divination, being led out into the forest to make this specific offering, to commit to being kind of a gateway for some specific animal guides. And instead of speaking to who they are, I will talk about another difficult initiatory experience.
Great.
Because I have a lot of those stories to share. So this one involved actually offering a hen out in the forest, and to these animals. And the day before the ritual, I went to get this hen, and is it okay that I'm talking about this here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We literally don't have any limits or boundaries on this program. I'm like, great, we're offering a hen. Let's hear about this story. I'm excited about the initiation. Because initiations come in many, many, many different forms, like an infinite amount of forms.
Yeah. And, this divination was coming from another person who worked from within the way that Malodoma teaches. And so this is a common thing to offer like a hen or a rooster as an offering to specific energies or entities or beings. And so I went to pick up the hen, and as I was driving to pick up the hen, I started getting super dizzy. I picked up the hen, I went home, I got to get to know the hen overnight, and meanwhile I kept getting more and more dizzy and more dizzy, to the point that if I was sitting still, everything around me was moving. Just the entire world was spinning constantly, to the point of nausea. So the next day we went out to the forest. We found the site. We created the ritual space. We did the ritual. We made the offering. Went to bed after it. It all went really well and was really beautiful. And so much gratitude to this hen. And, that night I'm laying in the tent, and the whole tent is just, the whole world is just spinning and spinning and spinning. And the next day this continues to the point that I have thrown up a couple times at this point. And, I'm finally like, this isn't going to stop. Like, there's something really wrong. I'm just going to be this dizzy for the rest of my life. This is a common story here. This like thinking I'm going to be in some state forever.
Oh my God. I so resonate with that. My husband has to say things to me like, this isn't going to last forever, Okay.
Yeah, I hear you. But when you're really in it, like when you're just so in it, it's like, this is just who I am for the rest of my life. Like, I'm just going to have to learn to live with being so dizzy I can't walk. I don't know where my mouth is if I'm wanting to take a drink of water. Like, this is just my life.
Oh my God, yes.
So anyway, I reached out to a couple people for support, and they're like, yeah, you'll probably be fine. Just stay with it. And, eventually over time, over the next couple of days, it did fade away slowly. But again, after it finally passed, I created the altar to these, new friends, these new guides that I was working with. And all of a sudden I could hear them. They were talking to me. I could feel them. There was this whole other level of otherworldly magic available for me. And it was, again, a true initiation, a true resetting of my entire nervous system, my body, my spirit, all of me, so that I could be open to this new pathway of spirit, I guess. And so again, it ended super beautifully, but it was again one of those situations that I wouldn't wish on anyone.
Spinning off all the stuff so you can get to that felt to me like spinning off some of that static that we have so you could really start to hear, like clearing the channel almost.
Hey, I haven't thought about it in that way. And yeah, that totally resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that. So, Larisa, how do we reach out and connect with you?
You can find me at www.larisanoonan.com. You can find me on Facebook too. I'm really not very active there, but if I write something new or if I'm hosting a class or something, I do post it there. So that's another place as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And we will put all of that on the show notes for this episode over at honorthefeminine.com to make that really easy. My
awesome.
love, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for reaching out and inviting me to your show. It's been an honor.
Thank you. Hello again, everyone. And thank you for joining Larisa and I today for this episode. I was so glad to be able to sit down with her and to really hear about her initiations and her path to becoming a ritualist. The way she really opened up and shared so much of herself. And how grief and releasing grief has woven and danced with her relationship with the ancestors. So if you would like to connect with Larisa, and I highly recommend that you do, you can go to the show notes for this episode 111, over at honorthefeminine.com, where there are all the links to get in touch. This episode is part of the Ancestral Healing mini-series. That's episodes 108 through 113, where the common thread through all the episodes is that there will be talk of the ancestors and relating to your ancestors, your blood lineage ancestors. All of us have been trained in ancestral lineage repair work. And if Larisa resonates with you, reach out to her about that. As always, when something resonates, the invitation is to move in that direction and find out more, right? That's always the invitation on this podcast. All right, everyone. Blessings to you and your people.